Hey, HCDA, and this is my guide for the Necrophages of Endless Legend 2. The Necrophage faction is one that I would say makes the game simpler, but not necessarily easier. First of all, you only get a single city, so keep in mind that if you lose that city, that's it, you're out of the game. However, you can attach as many territories as you want to that city, so you can make that city pretty awesome. Some of the faction-specific technology that you get access to also allows you to build specific buildings in your cities that are going to give you massive bonuses. These are one of a kind, but that doesn't really matter if you're only going to be building one city anyway. Because you only have a single city, your territory might feel like it's a bit harder to defend. However, there's a solution for that in the form of boroughs. You can build boroughs with any of your military units, and it's the primary way in which you're going to be claiming new territory. You upgrade your boroughs into nests, and once you do that, you can attach those for pretty much for free to your city, and voila, you have just made your city even better. However, even if you don't upgrade your burrows into nests, these are still going to be extremely useful because both burrows and nests connect to an underground tunnel network that is going to allow your units to pass from one burrow to another, or from one burrow to a nest or your city, and pretty much just get from one side of the continent to the other instantly if that's what you want to do. So the amount of movement you get out of your units is insane when playing this faction. Which, also means that if you are playing against the Necrophages, you might want to consider taking out those burrows all over the place to avoid suddenly finding a massive army in your backyard. Speaking of the army of the Necrophages, this is a very interesting way of playing. Initially, you are going to be able to build just a single type of unit called a larva. These units are not good, let's put it like that. These are going to be pretty much dying whenever an enemy looks at them. However, you can upgrade them, and you can upgrade them in 3 different types of other units. You can build them into flyers, you can build them into range units, or you can build them into melee units, which are basically more tanky. The fact that you can easily get flying units from the get-go with this particular faction is very interesting, and these flying units are actually pretty strong as well. The range units have a range of 3, which is also really good, and the melee units can actually heal themselves whenever they kill an enemy unit. So you can leverage all of these 3 types of units very easily. However, the only way to upgrade these larvae into these units is with a special type of resource called corpses. As the name of this resource might already suggest, corpses are literally the dead bodies of your enemies. There's a couple of ways of getting them. Straightforward way, I guess, is just doing combat, and every time you win a combat, you get battle spoils, and that will include some corpses. So doing more combat gives you more corpses and allows you to upgrade more of your units. But on top of that, there is a special mechanic that every time you win a combat, you're going to get a free new larva unit. So that means that every time you win a combat, let's say you don't lose anything, you get larva, you get corpses, and that means that you can use those corpses to upgrade that larva into a new unit and keep doing that often enough, and soon you'll be drowning in units and you can literally swarm the entire planet. And you know what's better than getting 1 free unit every time you win a combat? Well, getting 2 new units every time you win a combat, because every single one of the heroes of this faction has a high level ability, so you won't be able to get this early on. But once you get to a high enough level, I think it's level 6 when you get access to this, you will have another ability that's going to spawn a free flying unit for your army. So every time you win a combat, you get a larva and you get an upgraded flying unit already to start you out with. Now, it's very easy to see how this can get out of hand really quickly if you win several combats in a row. Basically, you win 3 combats and you have a brand new 6-sized army ready to go to win some more combats. And this is where the true power of this faction lies. You pretty much want to be fighting whenever you can, but you do need to be careful because you do get to replace your units fairly easily, but you don't want to be throwing them away. So every now and then you'll have to decide, okay, am I going to continue fighting with this particular army, or am I just going to give it a rest, have it heal itself a little bit, not getting more units in the process, but making sure I don't lose my experience units, because again, remember that every time you do combat, your units do gain experience, and those new units that are spawning are not going to have any experience to begin with, so it's going to take them a while to really catch up to your main army. The easiest way to get this snowball of massive swarming units going is by attacking the minor factions. Typically they will not be that strong, especially early on, so you can quite reliably just win armies, win fights with them without losing too many units yourself. And by the time you have several armies swarming around the map, keep in mind that you can have 2 armies participating in every combat, reinforcing each other, so make sure you have 2 complete stacks of units next to each other every time you do combat, making it pretty much impossible to lose. I mean, you might be losing a unit every now and then, but as long as you're gaining more units than you're losing, it's still a net gain, and all in all, that is just going to give you a massive amount of military power to basically do whatever you want across the map. Early on, I would recommend that you bring 2 flying units and 2 ranged units into every combat, and once your army size starts to be becoming larger, add in some of those melee units as well. And just mix and match them and have a little bit of everything going, because they each have their uses. You do definitely want to use your flying units to take out the enemy archers and any weak units that might be in the back. The melee units are awesome to just get in the way and do a lot of damage to the enemy while keeping them away from your weaker units. And of course the range units that you have are not the strongest, but they can reach pretty much anything that you need them to reach and do a significant amount of damage that way. All of the upgraded units of this faction are pretty sweet. Early on, you want to focus a little bit more on upgrading your flying units. They do fall off a little bit more to the end game. At that point, you probably want to focus more on the melee units with the ranged units upgraded, because those ranged units can actually spec into an infestor, which is going to spawn more melee units whenever they kill an enemy unit. It's not that hard to get at least 1 kill on the first turn, spawning you an additional melee unit, getting in the way of your enemies, of course, as well, taking damage that your own units are not taking. And even though that's a temporary unit, you basically just expand your entire army size by 1 or 2 by just getting a couple of kills early on. So that is awesome, and at that point it's pretty much impossible to lose any combat moving forward. Okay, so getting this amazing army going is going to be sweet, but it's not entirely trivial. So there's a couple of things you need to know. First of all, there is a specific building that you can build in your city that is called the Mount. And this Mount is going to give you a passive influx of corpses that you don't need to do any combat for. It just produces a certain amount of corpses per turn. Now, this building you can only build 1 of, and you want to make sure that you upgrade it to level 2 by, of course, building more other districts around. If you have 4 districts around this building, it's going to level up and produce more corpses for you. Another way to optimize the amount of corpses that you get is by making sure you pick counselors that improve your battle spoils. More battle spoils means more food, means more upgrades. Last but not least, there is a special ability that all your military units get that is called Devour the Land. This is going to allow you to literally strip the land from all its goodies and get those goodies to you for a temporary bonus. Of course, you do want to be careful about where you use this ability, because if that's an area that you planned on using for yourself, that's probably not the best choice to strip mine. However, if you are outside of your own zone, you can still use this ability, so you can actually use this to strip mine a certain piece of land that would otherwise likely go to the enemy, and thereby making sure you get some resources out of it and make that area a lot less interesting for the enemy in return. Okay, so how do you actually win with the Necrophages? First of all, you're going to want to build up your city in the first couple of turns, and while you're doing that, explore around you, grab some of the curiosities, etc, etc, pretty much what you would do with any faction. However, soon after you establish yourself a little bit, you want to start attacking some of the minor factions, making sure that you get those extra units going, because ideally you never want to produce actual units in your city itself. You want to keep growing your city, making sure you get more and more income, resources, etc, but not focusing as much on building military units. Now, of course, if you do need to build a couple of those larvae, that's fine, make sure you do that, but once you get that snowball of units going, it should be able to kind of sustain itself. As with most of the other factions, the faction-specific technologies that are part of the technology tree are pretty much all worth grabbing. They will either give you special abilities for your units, upgraded version of your units, or they will give you access to specific buildings that will supercharge your city, and especially those buildings are going to be extremely useful to pick up. Also keep in mind that there are certain abilities that are not that useful for the necrophages. For example, the fact that you can upgrade your city limit with some technologies is not actually going to do anything for the necrophages, so make sure that you do not prioritize those. The questline for the necrophages is really straightforward and is mostly about exploring the map and conquering certain enemies around the map, as well as leveling your main heroes. So all of that is pretty much going to align with doing a lot of combat anyway. That also means that in terms of victory conditions, you're probably going to be looking at either conquering a large portion of the map, just flat out destroying your enemies, or conquering a lot of fortresses along the way. That said, all of that is not necessarily the way you need to win the game, because you can also very easily go for things like getting a lot of resources, for example, and going for a bit more of an economic victory, because your one city is actually going to be really strong. It's also worth noting that as the necrophages, you can always declare war on your enemies without any cost, and that is very important because that means that you can easily spring a surprise attack on your enemies when they least expect it, which is not something you can necessarily easily do with some of the other factions. So keep that in mind when playing this. There's nothing wrong with just keeping some peace treaties in place. I mean, that will just keep those enemies off your back until you're ready to deal with them. All in all, I hope you have just as much fun playing the necrophages as I have, because it's literally my favorite faction in the entire game. If you find this guide useful, please make sure you like it so other people can find it as well. And if you have any questions, comments or suggestions, please let me know in the comments. Either way, if you are here, you are awesome, and I definitely hope to catch you in the next one.